Hey guys, it's Frozenballz here, and welcome to yet another episode of Minmaxer's Playground. Today, we are going to be looking at Mirage. Now, to most people, Mirage is known as a glass cannon, for the simple reason that while she has squishy stats, her damage potential is absolutely massive. This damage potential is mostly because of her abilities that she has, most notably the first, third, and fourth abilities. The second ability in general is kinda meh, could definitely do with a rework, but that's not the one which we're going to focus on for this particular video. When it comes to Mirage, she has a few different builds which she uses, and they focus on different kind of playstyles. But before we even get to the builds, there are certain aspects of Mirage which you need to understand. Basically the way how Eclipse works and how Hall of Mirrors works, and how Prism also augments her damage output as well at the same time. The first thing to bring to your attention is this. Eclipse buffs your physical damage. This includes your weapon damage as well as abilities which are physical based. For example, Exalted Blade, Wukong's Exalted Stick, Mesa's Peacemaker, etc. However, on the flip side, Eclipse does not buff abilities such as Siren Spores, Banshee's Soundquake, or any of the other abilities. Usually the damage reduction or bonus that Eclipse provides is limited to yourself. However, if you use a Total Eclipse Augment, you can actually buff your teammates as well or provide them a damage reduction so long as they're within the AoE radius of Total Eclipse. Since we have a simulacrum that isn't really a simulation room and a UI which can be really frustrating, it is very hard to see this. However, the underlying statement is that the amount of bonus damage or damage reduction you gain is determined by the environmental lighting at Mirage's specific position. When you use the Total Eclipse Augment, the bonus that your teammates get is also dependent on their position in relation to the map and the lighting as well. This is best tested in the Void because it has a wide variety of dark and light areas, so it can actually show you the difference in the buff and damage mitigation that you get. Originally, the UI used to show how much of a damage reduction or damage bonus you used to get with Mirage. However, in a recent patch, that indicator has vanished for unknown reasons. Despite this, the biggest indicator whether you are getting a damage bonus or damage reduction is the visual input that you get. If you're standing out in the light, you get a damage bonus and your Mirage shines bright like a diamond. If you're standing in the shadows, it literally looks like a shadow. Having said that, let's talk about the first build for Mirage, which is the Team Buff build using the Total Eclipse Augment. As previously mentioned, since Eclipse only buffs physical damage, not actual power damage, this will only buff the damage output of abilities such as Exalted Blade, Radial Javelin, Mesa's Peacemakers, or even Nova's Nullstar. However, this does not work on abilities such as Siren Spores, Soundquake, or even Rhino's Stomp. As mentioned previously, the buff or damage reduction is based on your location in the map relative to the environmental lighting. For this particular reason, you want to stand in the brightest areas possible to give yourself the damage bonus, as well as providing your teammates with a damage bonus as well. Total Eclipse is one of the strongest buffing abilities that you can get in Warframe, providing up to nearly 600% damage bonus. The build is pretty straightforward since it relies on one thing, your teammates being buffed and you standing in one spot and providing that buff. For this particular reason, you stack Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, Intensify, and Energy Conversion, as well as Power Drift for that maximum power strength bonus that you can get. You need Total Eclipse since that's the augment that actually allows you to share your buff with your teammates. Stretch ensures that you can cover your teammates fairly well without having to worry too much about, range issues. By using Prime Flow, you have a massive energy pool which can allow you to store up a bunch of energy and use your ability as you need to cast it over and over. Corrosive Projection is the aura of choice. Again, this is defined primarily by the enemy faction that you're going to be fighting. Your arcane of choice for this particular build will be Energized, since you can regenerate your energy all the time and be able to, keep it topped off. Xenuric helps as well by having, energy recycling going on at the same time, so you can keep casting your very expensive abilities to provide the team buffs. This build literally requires nothing special. One of the best places to use a build like this is going to be on Berahinia or anything that requires you to be standing still for long extended periods of time. Case in point, this works excessively well if you're trying to buff a Mesa using Peacemakers in a defense mission to kill enemies very quickly, very efficiently. The second buff which you need to understand about is Hall of Mirrors. The way Hall of Mirrors works now is at max rank, you still have 4 clones, but only 2 of those clones will do damage, and it's always the 2 clones in front of you or in the direction that you are facing. This was done primarily as a way of optimizing the Warframe and the game itself. Having 4 clones and your main character firing weapons, especially weapons such as Ogres or anything that had loads of graphics being produced, had the potential of crashing people's PCs. One of the best examples is the original Comb when it first came out. As you all may remember, that was a projectile-based shotgun which would create so much lag with all of the Mirage clones firing at the same time, it would crash people's PCs. At base power strength, each clone does 20% of the current weapon's total damage. This percentage is affected by power strength, while the number of holograms is not touched. Mods equipped on your current weapon will also affect the hologram's weapon stats as well, and duration makes sure that the clones last for a long time. Since the clones don't actually have a physical existence, they're literally just images, and since they have a higher threat generation as compared to your Warframe, enemies will tend to attack your clones more often than not. This can be very, very handy when you're fighting against bombards, for example, since missiles will literally fly right through them. This also means that clones will phase in and out between terrain and through, the map itself, since they don't actually have any collision box. One thing to understand about holo mirrors is that because each clone retains the stats of a weapon that you're currently using, and each clone does its own separate amount of damage, albeit reduced, when you combine this with a hull of a Malevolence augment, this can essentially double the damage output of a Mirage when you have enough power strength in the build itself. With regards to holo Malevolence, at max rank, doppelgangers will be dealing 50% extra damage at maximum stacks. Now let's talk about this in relation to the holo Malevolence build. With the way the calculation is done, using the holo Malevolence augment with maximum power strength combining with energy conversion gives you 334% power strength. What this basically means is that your clones will be doing 111% more damage. And this is just raw damage from holo Malevolence itself. This does not include damage buffs provided by Eclipse, or the stealth damage you can do to blinded enemies via Prism, or from using Naramon. In relation to what I said earlier on, since each clone retains the stats of your weapons, this also works as a very good platform for applying status. Since your clones retain the stats of your weapons, using weapons with a high status chance gives you 3 different chances of applying that status effect. This works exceptionally well with slash procs or gas procs because of their scaling as well. In addition to the scaling, slash procs and gas procs can be reapplied over and over as well, so you can have multiple of those procs going off at the same time. This works exceptionally well with the idea that your clones can apply the status as well as yourself, so the number of procs being applied at a time to an enemy just increases so much that the amount of damage output is just insane. As previously mentioned, the holo Malevolence build relies heavily on power strength. For this particular reason, we use Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, Energy Conversion, and Intensify. Since holo Malevolence is all about massive duration, you want to be using Narrow-Minded and Prime Continuity in there as well. Alternatively, you could give out some of that power strength in order to equip a more defensive mod such as Quick Thinking. However, if you decide to use Quick Thinking, you need to make one adjustment to the build. Using Quick Thinking in conjunction with the rest of the mods, you will not be able to fit it. To compensate for this fact, you use a rank 7 Blind Rage instead. This drops your overall power strength a little bit, but it gives you more survivability and it gives you that defensive mod to survive incoming damage as well. And to be honest, while I do like the maximum power strength build, I like having that defensive mod, to save me in an oh shit situation. But that's just personal preference, really. Since you're using Blind Rage, this build is going to be very, very expensive. For that particular reason, you use Prime Flow. Prime Flow gives you a bigger energy pool, and since you're going to be running with an Arcane Energize anyway, energy should not really be an issue since casting abilities is not that expensive now. Using Prime Flow also synergizes with Quick Thinking if you decide to take that defensive mod as well, so it works in both scenarios. In terms of focus schools, for this particular frame, you've actually got 2 choices. You can either go with Generic like most of the times where you can have, free energy regeneration. Alternatively, you can take Madurai. Now, Madurai's passives give you percentage bonuses towards IPS damage. We don't really care about the other 2, it's mostly the slash passive which we're interested in. The reason for this is simple. The slash bonus means your slash procs will do even further damage. Combine this with the knowledge that clones retain a weapon's stats, the potential to spread a lot of slash damage and slash procs is insane, which means your damage output is increased even further. This holo Malevolence build benefits mostly from when you use weapons like Amprex, Sonicor, Sinoid Simulor, Atrax, Quanta Vandal, and many other weapons which have the potential to hit multiple enemies in one attack. An extension on the idea of using holo Malevolence, there is also one more build which I need to talk about. This is Mirage's Meli focused build. The base idea is more or less the same, where you use Hall of Malevolence to buff your own damage and buff the damage of your clones as well. But this build focuses primarily on using melee weapons and using a combination of Naramon with Prism. When you combine this build with Mirage's Prism or using Naramon as well, you have the ability to take advantage of stealth damage, increasing your damage of your melee weapons and attacks. In relation to this particular build, you'll be using a combination of Transient Fortitude, Blind Rage, and Energy Conversion. Since the damage bonus that you get for Hollow Mirrors and the Augment is based on Power Strength, stacking as much Power Strength is ideal. You use a combination of a max Prime Continuity and a rank 7 Narrow-Minded to give yourself a good duration for your clones, and then on top of that you also use Prime Flow for a bigger energy pool. Since you do not have any efficiency but you rely mostly on either Zenuric or Arcane Energize to provide your energy for you, you ideally want to have a big energy pool so that you can cast your abilities despite the high cost that Blind Rage causes. Since you're going to be using Prism to blind people, using a combination of Stretch and Cunning Drift is very good because this gives you a blind distance of around 30 meters itself. Hall of Malevolence is the required mod to actually make this build work as well. In terms of auras, as usual, Corrosive Projection is the one of choice. You can change it based on the faction you're fighting. You will be making use of Energize more often than not in this particular build, just to keep yourself powered up so that you can keep your tank as well as your abilities active. This is a build which focuses entirely on having 100% uptime on Hall of Malevolence and Eclipse. For this build to function even further, using Naramon provides you that survivability by going invisible, and it increases your damage potential as well. In terms of weapons, you're looking at using weapons similar to the Limbo video. High range weapons which have a lot of slash damage. Slash damage is usually a recurring theme when it comes to melee weapons in my builds. The reason for this is simple. Slash damage scales very, very well because it's finisher damage. The underlying statement of this build is to utilize the bonus that you get from using either Prism or using Naramon. Combine Prism and Naramon with gas and slash procs. All of a sudden you have this massive damage potential because of all of these things coming together. And that's one of the biggest key points of this particular build and why it functions so well. And that's pretty much it in terms of Mirage builds. The builds are pretty straightforward to play with. It's mostly about understanding the mechanics behind why those builds perform so well. Mirage is more or less a glass cannon, but because her abilities work the way they do, it makes her a very, very powerful glass cannon. Having said that, because she's so squishy, you have to be very careful with how you play her as well, but the potential is there to be a massive, massive DPS frame. As usual, thank you very much for being here, guys. It is Frozenballz with another episode of Minmaxer's Playground. If you like what you saw, make sure you leave a like, a comment, a subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.